when I invest in startups, I really talk to the founders about protecting and guarding their mental and physical health. When you're young, you feel like that is not important.
Welcome to Midland Money Mindset, your weekly dose of inspiration and insights to ensure you enjoy each step of your journey. Whether you're saving for the future, planning your next big adventure, or simply looking to add more joy to your life, you've come to the right place. Now, let's dive in.
Have you ever built everything you thought would make you happy, only to feel more lost than ever? Adam Rossi, a trailblazing Inc. 500 entrepreneur, helped the U.S. government hunt terrorists through cutting-edge technology, then sold his company and spiraled into depression. But that pain became his pivot. Today, Adam leads life-saving ventures in aerospace and energy, lives by the power of family-first entrepreneurship, and redefines success with purpose, health, and legacy at the core. This episode is a masterclass in building a life that matters. Let's get things started with Adam Rossi. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Midland Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Midland Financial. Let's dive into the show. All right, well, I have Adam Rossi today, entrepreneur and fellow REBL Dad. And for those of you that don't know about REBL Dads, it stands for Responsible Entrepreneur Balanced Leader. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, so listen, we're going to spend a lot of time on your role as an entrepreneur, what you've done. But, our listeners are super fascinated with the entrepreneurial journey. So maybe you could give them some insight into your journey up to founding a company, and then we'll talk about that company and the sale of it. But just give us a sense of who you are.
Sure. Yeah, so I was always interested in founding a business. I just didn't know what it would be. So ever since I was in second grade, I was drawing trademarks and logos for a business, and I would tell everyone, I'm going to own a business one day. And if you remember, back then it was not the typical path, and entrepreneurship maybe wasn't as cool as it is now. And I started as a teenager to really, really get into computers. So I would put together computers from parts. I would start programming. And I wanted to be a structural engineer, but I started to really fall in love with the idea of writing computer programs for structural engineers. And so when I graduated college, I went to work briefly for a consulting company and then founded Platinum Solutions as a company to write software for other structural engineers. It didn't turn out to be that way, but that was the idea.
Right. So it sounds like being an entrepreneur was in your DNA, and it sounds like a lot of this was pre-Shark Tank. So it wasn't really, I feel like Shark Tank was a real inflection point for this whole thought process around kind of working towards being an entrepreneur, right?
When I started my company, I was 24 years old. It was 1998, 99 timeframe. And there weren't a whole lot of resources. Certainly you couldn't get a bank loan, right? I mean, I went to the bank and they laughed me out of there. I leased a Dell laptop and had to personally guarantee it. And, there was no funding for entrepreneurs, no resources, and it was not considered a safe or normal pathway.
So what made you, you talked about founding Platinum Solutions, right? So what made you, what was the interest and the impetus behind going down that route and founding that company? What made you just say, hey, I'm going to go in this direction and we're going to make it work?
It was, if you think about that time frame, the early, mid, late 90s, you could be the first person to write a computer program that did X or Y. So I was the first person, to my knowledge at least, that wrote a computer program to design the concrete reinforced retaining walls you see on the side of the highway. Up till then, people were taking out these ASTM steel manuals, concrete manuals. You'd look through charts and you'd come up with these numbers and you'd say, okay, the bottom of the wall has to be this thick and you got to put the steel here. And I just was looking at that saying, this is ridiculous. Like you could just write a computer program that would do this perfectly every time, right? And so I did that. And other engineers said, I'd like to buy that. And so it was early validation. But to tell you the truth, I really just fell in love with the new exciting world of software. And then the web was coming online and, you could see all these possibilities. And I felt like I could do I could do this. I could do a better job than a lot of the folks that were doing this stuff. I wasn't impressed with a lot of the programs that I was using. And I think it's the classic, I can do better.
Right. So you found a problem. People started clamoring over it and you ran with it. And that was born. I mean, you think if it wasn't for that, it would have been something else, right?
Yeah. And it did turn into something else relatively quickly. I mean, the company that I ended up selling really became known as a code breaking, evidence collection, image analysis. So very, very specialized tools for defense, law enforcement, and intelligence. Not something that I'd planned. And I think like a lot of entrepreneurs was in the right place at the right time. Because I'm in the DC metro area, I did a single favor for a law enforcement agency to help turn around a project that was just really, really, really in dire straits and was going to be a real embarrassment for this agency. I worked 20 hours a day. I turned it around. I said, I want nothing to do with the federal government ever again. And, but 9/11 happened and I got pulled back really quickly for some very, very high priority things. And my entire company pivoted towards that. I mean, I never had a conscious plan or decision that this is the way it would go, but we grew so quickly and it was such an exciting time and an important mission at the time, after 9/11 that the company just became known for highly specialized national security and intelligence software and was ultimately acquired by a defense contractor.
I guess you hate those words about never working for the federal government, right? Or with.
It's funny because people today write business plans and think about in detail what their business is going to do. Not only did I not plan, I actively planned around what we did. So I always say, plan as much as you can, but factor in that the world is going to change. Luck has a huge factor in this, timing, and just roll with it.
Got to be flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be flexible. Yeah. So, one of the things that intrigues me about you is there was a thing that you called BS on, which was husband and wife business teams are a liability, right? People have said that, and that's something you've kind of called BS on. And you've said that your company's secret weapon and hands down the smartest thing you have done was married your wife, Layla. And as many of our listeners know, my wife is directly involved in our practice. She's our director of marketing. She's the reason why I'm wearing this shirt today. Yeah. She's like, you should be doing this with the REBL Dad shirt. So, can you talk about why you feel that way, why you call BS on this, and why you feel like Layla's such a superpower for you in the business?
The thing about co-founding a business with someone is you have to have total trust in that person. And how many businesses do we know where the founders or the owners feel that they're not being compensated fairly and become at odds with each other or don't trust each other? Are they giving me the whole truth? I had a partner with my wife that was 100% trustworthy and was willing to do everything it took, just like I was, to see this company through. And so she worked at Anderson Consulting for the first year or two while I was a solo practitioner. She paid the bills, right? We had our piece of crap car, our little crappy apartment, and she was keeping us afloat with her income. As soon as the company showed that it could stand on its own, she came over and we split decision-making and authority to say, I would go out with, NSA, whoever, the agency that we're working with on something. She would be inside the company doing the hiring, promotions, financial stuff. And so we had kind of sales and technical and operations really kind of split up. I had a partner that I had 100% faith in, and I don't know many other folks that can say that about their business partners. So I understand why people say, I don't want to invest in a company with a husband and wife, because if the husband and wife have a divorce, the company can be put at jeopardy, right? That's why people say that. For me, and my wife Lila and I, we were just like, we're never getting a divorce. Our relationship was where it needed to be for us to work together, to never really have that concern that we're going to fight amongst ourselves. There was never in the entire, and we had this company for 10 years. I don't think we ever got into an argument about a decision that I made or that she made. So we just had a great relationship. And I do not know how anyone could found a business without having that type of support.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that completely, because when I started my business, right, I started with zero. At the time, Denise was an executive recruiter and she was doing super well. And, to her credit and my credit, that allowed us and me to do what I needed to do with the business strategically. And I didn't have to do things that compromised the business. I could always do things with a clear heart and a clear head, because I didn't have to worry. And that support was, amazing. And I see where, I guess, banks, investors would have a challenge and concern. But, hopefully if they have the right couple, right, they look through that and it might be, a more supporting factor than it is a detriment when all's said and done, like it has been in your case.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think it's no different, I think, than a bank that looks at two co-founders, right, that aren't related or married, right? Is the relationship going to last or isn't it? I mean, and you can kind of place your bets accordingly.
And you have less reasons to stay attached there in a lot of cases
Correct.
than you do as a husband and wife. So one of the things that I really respect that I've learned and I watch what you've done is in what seemingly has become like an instant gratification economy, if you will. I think it's so important, and you show this very often. You speak about the value of marriage, family, and kids. Why has that become such an important part of what you put out in the world?
It's weird. I didn't think I would become as outspoken on this topic as I have, but I feel a need to counteract what I consider to be a very negative message that young people are getting these days, which says this selfish kind of live for the moment, and kids are too expensive and they're too hard, and you really, who needs kids anyways? And by the way, why marry your girlfriend? Just stay, living together. And it's not that I have a strong Orthodox religious background or any of these things. It's just I have seen the value of getting married early to someone that I love, having 3 kids, raising them together in a loving family that constantly does things together. I've seen the other side of that. Single parent households, kids that are just desperate for example, a male role model. They don't have one in their life. And so I just feel obligated to bring it up all the time. And when I invest in a company, I'm probably pretty annoying. I'll say, hey, by the way, you have a girlfriend for 5 years. Think about getting married? What are you thinking about kids? I try to bring this up because I've seen this message where, and it's not only the kind of selfish one, but it's also the put the career first and kids, wait to have kids. I feel like a lot of people are getting tricked into waiting too long and then saying, I wish I'd either had a child, I've waited too long biologically, or I'd like to have had more children, but I put a career first. And it wasn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be.
I respect a lot of the stuff you put out, because I think there's something to be said for being able to do that and bring up a family and be with the same person for 20, 30 years. And, it's rewarding. So one of the things, I wanted to also talk about, you talked about your kids, right, is our kids collectively are living, growing up in an interesting world, right? They are in a way privileged in certain ways and in a lot of ways. How do we ensure that, kids like ours, grow up in a way that, because they have plenty, right? How do we make sure and ensure that they grow up the way they should and not feeling that entitlement and working towards and having that same drive you had, right? From an early age to want to do something, to want to have a meaningful impact.
It's one of my number one concerns. It's something that Lyle and I talk about all the time, and we're very conscious of this. There's a few things that I think just in general are helpful when we think about raising kids. One is they watch us all the time, right? They don't listen to what we say, they watch what we do. And I feel like if we are modeling the type of behavior where we're not the entitled jerk at the restaurant, why is my meal, wrong?
Right.
If we're not throwing money around and acting like a big shot. And so part of it is just modeling the behavior. I think that goes a huge way to how we want our kids to behave. The other one is just talking about money openly. So, there's kind of this stigma maybe about talking about money is considered unseemly or
level of taboo.
Yeah, or kids aren't ready for it yet. And so we constantly talk about business decisions, investment decisions. The kids are involved on a lot of our business trips. And I say this to everyone. If you want to visit me at my little aerospace company, bring your kids. If we have a meeting, go ahead and bring them. Because I'm doing the same thing, So I think it's a matter of thinking about it and being really careful about it and talking about it and modeling what you want to see.
I agree. And I think that they watch everything we do. They're really a deep reflection of us in so many ways. So it's important. And I think where people, and we talk to families about this in our wealth management practice, families don't have to disclose every dollar. Like they don't have to,
Correct.
They don't have to pull out the tax return and show the kids and show them the net worth statement, but they should have an understanding, an idea of what's going on in the family and sharing stuff without having that level of detail to get them involved, to understand that there are decisions that a business owner needs to make, sometimes good, sometimes bad, all may affect the bottom line in a positive way or a negative way. That learning that your kids are having outside the classroom by visiting those companies is probably far more valuable than anything they're learning in the classroom to date.
I mean, the level of financial literacy that I see, for example, in our internship, these kids are starved for financial information. They are not getting it in schools by and large. And I even go back to, we used to have a home ec class where they would teach you how to fill out a checkbook and keep your check. They don't even do that anymore. So kids are kind of like, I don't even know what a checkbook is. How do you write a check? What is it? I think as parents, we can't assume they're learning this stuff anywhere outside of the family.
Yeah.
You must assume they need to learn it from the family.
So, tying in the kids for a minute, right? I had the pleasure, as I mentioned earlier, meeting you thanks to the REBL Dads, the Responsible Entrepreneur Balanced Leaders is what it stands for. Can you share with us what that community, that REBL Dads community has meant to you?
Yeah, I've been a part of a couple entrepreneurship organizations, YEO, now EO. And so they're focused more on pure entrepreneurship, right? Everyone there owns a business. And that's good when you're starting, because you're all kind of like, how do I read a balance sheet? You're learning the basic stuff. But as you get a little more mature in your life and business, family stuff becomes a lot more important, and really the thing that you really spend a lot of time and effort to nurture. And it's helpful, I think, to associate with other people that share those challenges and those values, right? So raising kids, all the things we just talked about. How do you raise them right? How are they not be entitled? How do you teach them this stuff? How do you find the balance with, your company and all the employee stuff, and then spend meaningful time with your family? So something like REBL Dads is unique in that we are all in the same place. And you'll notice that when we talk about stuff, even though the topic might be business related, it gets into family really quickly, right? And so I just say it's hard for people who don't have children to understand a lot of things about the world. In my opinion, it is, for example, the moment I held my first child, I started thinking about the future 1,000 times more than I did before that child, right? You just start to think about, what is the world I want these kids to live in? And you have that different perspective. And I think hanging out with people that don't have kids, it's hard to have that common ground. So that's why I think this is a unique group, and I love the focus. And I think more dads need to become involved in this and get that same benefit that we have.
Yeah. My only regret is I wish they started this like 10, 15 years ago when my kids were significantly younger, because the amount of stuff that I've just learned over a short period of time, just through the experience sharing of others, I'm like, man, I feel like I could have done some of the stuff that I did better, especially the first one, right? I mean, maybe you agree, maybe you don't. I feel like my first one was an experiment because you didn't have any of this stuff. You don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going to happen. And the second one really learns from what you learned on the first one. But if you had a group of other dads to kind of learn some of this stuff, just like learning from other entrepreneurs, right? It speeds up and you make less mistakes when all's said and done, right?
I mean, absolutely. And, my wife and I feel that way about our first son too, who had to ride along with us as we learned on the job. And, the other thing is every family goes through major hardships or challenges.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so having folks that you can talk to when that comes up, I think is also a great benefit, right? I mean, we're part of a group where, if there was a real kind of crisis with a child, you could reach out to our group and you would get a bunch of very supportive folks who would get on the phone with you right away and help you through it.
Agreed. Do you know finances can be joyful with your partner? We created a fantastic guide for couples to start their journey surrounding their finances. Head over to Midland.us/couplesjoy to download your free copy today. Don't miss out. Start bringing more joy into your financial conversations. One of the things I want to talk about is, today's founders have something that you and I really never did, and that's the power of content creation. Why do you think content creation and having a digital presence today offers so much value?
I really encourage folks that are, even if they're not entrepreneurs, they work a corporate job or they are solo practitioners. I really encourage them to create a digital presence that will reflect what they want to achieve professionally. And the reason is it's something that you take with you, you own no matter where you go. And so if you're working a 9 to 5 and you want to move to another company, that presence comes along with you. It's not a corporate asset, it's you, right? And I think the days of the paper resume capturing your background are gone. And I learn a lot more about potential candidates from what I see in their, social media presence or their LinkedIn presence or videos they've made, interviews they've done, than I do from what they write on their resume. I'll give you an example. I'm mentoring someone who has a lot to offer, but on paper does not really, the background just doesn't show it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look, when we talk, I'm really impressed with your ideas and how you lay them out. I really, really encouraged him to create a social media presence. And I said, the key really is, if it's something like LinkedIn, these don't have to be long pieces, but just try to be consistent. Try to have a theme or a message that you reinforce. Don't overthink it. It doesn't have to be an overly produced thing. Just start putting your ideas out there. And it's amazing what manifests from that. The messages of people that will reach out, new opportunities that come your way. And it's not a high bar of entry, right? Anyone can do this.
I think that's great points and really actionable. So your journey has allowed you to spend a lot of time with many entrepreneurs. From your side of what you've experienced, can you share what you feel and what you've seen as the X factor, the X factor for entrepreneurs?
The X factor is definitely not intelligence. You see the bell curve, and I feel like there's a sweet spot of person who's smart enough to get things done, but dumb enough to not worry about every little thing that can go wrong, because a bunch of stuff will go wrong.
Right.
I have some friends that are super geniuses, but they could never be an entrepreneur because they'll think of every single flaw in a potential plan and they'll talk themselves out of everything, right? It is a willingness to go out there and try things, to not give up when we first hit a barrier. So, the grit, the determination, the ambition. But really, I think we all know entrepreneurs where when you meet, you look at the business they've created, it's amazing. And then you talk to them and you're kind of like, this is, this kind of normal guy. But there is that X factor, that little thing that caused them to take action. And so I think so many people have amazing talents and ideas, but they never convert it to action. They sit there for years and think about it. They can never, maybe get comfortable with taking a little risk to go out on their own or to try something different. So they stay in kind of their comfort zone. They can't step out of it. And the entrepreneur X factor, the first thing is just step out of that comfort zone, get out there, take a little bit more risk. Tell yourself, what's the worst that could happen? I fail at this business and I move on, but just that's a major X factor, because if you don't do that, you obviously can't win, right? The other, thing I think from so many folks that have went through the entire kind of entrepreneurial process and had amazing exits, there's this pivot they make where they start as really young, dumb, ambitious, hardworking. They get through and then they kind of mature and they become a more effective manager of people, and they learn a bunch while they're on their entrepreneurial journey. I think it's that lifelong learning aspect where, I was just at MIT 2 weeks ago, sitting in a college classroom learning stuff. I feel like most entrepreneurs love to learn their entire lives. I think that's an important part of the mix.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a common thread as well. Going back to the conversation we had around the content creation, you had a post not too long ago that retiring young is overrated. And it is very similar to a conversation I had with Mike Fata, who was on episode 225. I think he sold his company at the age of 40 for like $419 million. And then he was like, well, now what?
Mm-hmm.
And, you've been open about becoming depressed after selling your company, and even going so far as asking Layla if you could give it all back.
Yeah, right.
I think this is a common theme with founders. What advice do you have for founders who are considering selling or who have already sold? What can help them get through that process?
I sold my company at 39, so around the same age as the gentleman you just described. And the issue is we're still young, right? We still have a lot to offer, but your world goes from talking to a bunch of people every day to talking to far less people. It becomes very isolating. So you have to be ready mentally for this abrupt change. And I think there are ways you can navigate through that when you know it's going to happen. I think the successful exits that I've seen, people have figured out how they're going to structure their day such that there aren't long periods of loneliness. Either they get involved in another company, they become a mentor. A lot of my friends are professional coaches, so they're working with 10 companies throughout the year, and they get their fill of interacting and helping and doing just things like that, or founding another company or getting involved part-time in a company. All these different ways you could do this, being involved in a philanthropy, becoming more involved in kids' activities. I just think it's like running into a wall, right? Where if something abruptly changes in your life, it's traumatic. And for me, it was very depressing. And so I made a poor acquisition right off the bat, where I didn't do enough diligence on the deal, because I just felt like I needed to do something, and that was a mistake. So I really warn people, try to avoid major financial decisions right after you sell your company. You're emotionally vulnerable. You're not thinking clearly. So try to avoid that. And then find a way to structure your time so that you're not sitting around thinking about, having a beer at 8 a.m. and,
Right.
all the bad things that can go with a lot of idle time.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. We talk to families when they're approaching retirement several years before, and we start talking to them not about the financial aspect of things, because that's we worked on for years, but we try to get them early on to start thinking about what their next is going to be, how that structure is going to look for them, because it's a challenge. It's a challenge whether you're selling a company, retiring from a 40-year career. They're very similar. You mentioned earlier about the kids, and we talked about health, right? Your health is important, modeling. And I've heard you share that you often say to young people, there are billionaires out there who would trade all their money for your health. For those entrepreneurs or parents who might be listening, who understand the importance of health, but say, hey, I'm too busy. How do you make mental and physical health a priority?
Yeah, this is a big issue for me. And when I invest in startups, I really talk to the founders about protecting and guarding their mental and physical health. And when you're young, you feel like that is not important. I certainly abused myself working 20-hour days, getting 4 hours a night for sleep, not exercising. And I started getting weird health issues where I got shingles in my face when I was 24, 25, something, very early on. There were a lot of stress-related maladies that were not easy to diagnose, like back pain. When my stress went away, it went away. And so I try to tell folks, look, I got lucky. I was able to turn it around before it became diabetes, high blood pressure. And so I try to get that message out there. I would have much rather, if I had to do it all over again, take the time every morning and tell my team, I work out with a personal trainer. You'll see me at this time every day because I will go to the gym. I could have easily done that.
Right.
I didn't give myself permission at the time. A lot of people have worked themselves into the ground, and now they would, to your point, trade all the money back just to have a day where they weren't in pain, miserable, right? Just get their health back. So we have to guard it. The mental aspect, one that probably isn't talked about enough, but I think stress is a real poison in our system mentally and physically. So managing stress through exercise, yoga, sauna, I mean, that to me, I think is also something that we need to be talking to founders and people that are working these professional jobs that are so grueling. Take care of yourself. Give yourself permission to do this.
Yeah. Plus, if you take care of yourself, others will see that and they'll take care of themselves, right? Going back to that modeling with the kids, the folks that that are part of your organization, they model the same way. So if they could see you taking out the time, they'll take out the time and they'll be more productive, hopefully, right? If not, they'll be a lot healthier at the very least. So I think those are great words. So I can't end this show without asking, as we're talking about health and food, I have to ask about your real maple syrup, because I think that there are so many people out there that think that the brown high fructose corn syrup that you buy on the shelves is actually maple syrup. And that's kind of terrifying. I've been a big follower of Casey Means and, Good Energy. We had the gal from Wake Up and Read the Labels on our show. And I think that that's something that's becoming more and more important. Talk about your maple syrup for a minute and kind of, what got you involved in that and why that's so important in terms of food and eating.
We have 550 acres on the Shenandoah River. So we have a bunch of maple trees we tap every winter or fall, spring into just making maple syrup with the kids. We started off small. We give it to coaches, teachers, family members. We keep bees. So we get honey from the bees, raw honey, unprocessed, put it in glass jars, give that out, grow fruit in our orchard that we do a no spray or low spray on, grapes, ginseng. We try to make all this stuff just so that we know where it's coming from, because there's a bunch of junk in things like maple syrup or honey where they're heavy metals. It's coming from China. It's got artificial flavors and dyes so I think a lot of people, unfortunately, they think maple flavored syrup, which is, a bunch of corn syrup with a bunch of chemicals in it, is actual maple syrup. And when they first taste, all maple syrup is that we make it is just maple sap coming out of the tree, boiled down and put in a jar. I mean, that's it, right? It's one ingredient. And when they taste it, they say, oh my God, I can't believe this. Same with honey, right? It's never been never been heated, and it's got the local pollen in it. And we've made a bunch of believers out of our honey as well. I think the good thing that's happened that I've noticed kind of recently is people are having an appreciation for the source of their food. And that's something that I go back and think about those zingers on the gas station shelf. What chemicals are in those things? It's so bad.
I can assure you there was no food in those things.
No. They sit there for months, right?
Oh my gosh. I think that's a good news. I think, when our parents and grandparents, were here, food was a lot different. We're kind of going back to those roots because we kind of lost our way along the way. And, we talk about, because my boys play hockey. So we go up to Canada, we used to go up to Canada quite often. And a lot of the food up there, they don't allow half the stuff we allow in it. And it's so different. It's so much better for you. But I love what you're doing and, keep doing it because it's so important. And I think that just plays into the physical and mental health. It all works together when all's said and done. So, Adam, listen, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. It's been joyful for our listeners. And we ask each of our guests the same final question. And that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success? Because we're all about joy, and we want to make sure that everybody's successful as they're listening to the show.
Well, I'm heavily weather dependent. We had a beautiful 70-degree day here in Virginia. So I worked out with my personal trainer, kissed the wife and daughter goodbye as they're getting ready to go to school. And then I drove out to the farm and I worked on a spring that I'm improving. The goal of the spring is to never touch plastic. So set up some stainless steel pipe involved with it and got it looking pretty good. And then came back to do this podcast. So working on a spring today brought me joy.
There you go. And it'll bring your family joy because they won't have to have all that plastic stuff in their water on a go-forward basis once it's all set up. Well, thank you so much for taking out the time and sharing. We're going to have all of your information in the show notes. But if people want to learn more about your journey, learn more about you, connect with, what's the easiest and the best way for them to do that?
The best way is LinkedIn. I'm also pretty active on X, so feel free to DM me on X as well. Those are the best ways.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for taking out the time. Send my best to the family and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much for having me, Larry. Really appreciate it.
Adam, thank you for bringing such raw honesty, deep wisdom, and entrepreneurial heart to today's conversation. Your journey from building mission-critical technology to finding purpose beyond the exit reminds us that true wealth is built through connection, conviction, and impact. We're better for hearing your story. Adam Rossi and all that he is up to can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find him can be found in the show notes.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Midland Money Mindset. Remember, it's not just about the money, it's finding joy in the journey and embracing the right mindset. If you love the show, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Don't forget to follow along for more tips and inspiration. Please visit the social links below to connect with Larry or his guests. Until next time, keep smiling, keep thriving, and remember to think about, what did you do today that brought you joy?
The opinions voiced in the Midland Money Mindset Show with Lawrence Sprung are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy ensures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Guests on the Midland Money Mindset Show are not affiliated with CWM LLC.